Welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt, that is Chuck. This is episode 86. We've got a really special one for you today, folks. Two stone cold classics, one in the making and one that is very much established and ready for reappraisal. First up, it's the drama. It's the new Robert Pattinson Zendaya vehicle, and it's proving to be quite controversial out there in the streets. It's asking some questions that maybe viewers don't want to provide the answers for. Well, we here at Theater and Stream, we are going to be answering all of those uncomfortable questions for you. And then we're on to A History of Violence. This is the 2005 movie that sort of signaled the return of top-tier David Cronenberg. And you may be asking yourself, what could these two movies possibly have in common? Well, look no further than today's episode title. These are movies about a diabolical secret. And so, yeah, Chuck, what do you make of these films and sort of how they join together?
At their core, they're like I love I don't know. There's the imagery in both of these where it's just these a couple standing next to each other, and it makes you what's that painting of the farmer and his wife? I forget what that's called.
Oh, American Gothic.
American Gothic.
Yeah.
And because it makes me wonder about that painting, because it's like, what is behind the eyes, of both of these individuals? What do they know about each other? What don't they know? What have they had to accept, and what will they grapple with finding unacceptable? That's the defining through line between both of these. One has is an adaptation of a graphic novel from the 90s written by the dude who created Judge Dredd, which is pretty interesting provenance, in and of itself. Whereas the other, is an original creation from a very, I guess, is he still an up and comer, or is he one of the boys now too? Kind of like Emerald Fennell. Is Christopher Borgley one of the guys now?
I think so. I think this sort of established him. I mean, I loved Dream Scenario. That movie was so good, and I still want to go back and rewatch it because I feel like it was sort of criminally underrated. But yeah, I think this one kind of establishes him.
Oh, bear with me. I'm just trying to find something for my son to draw on that isn't recording equipment. If he'll forgive me for my effrontery. But I think, the time has come. Let's move on to the first one, which, of course, is the more recent film and the one that is incredibly, I can't even say divisive, because we're getting a lack of comments, a lack of substance in what people have to say about this movie. But why don't you introduce this one?
Yeah, so the drama, it's so interesting because it's people from the get-go, you wanted to see this movie because of the trailers out there. It always claimed to hold this secret, this big twist, and that's sort of, I think, what got people's butts in the seats in the theaters. But I had the twist revealed for me like a week or two before the movie even came out. So I was spoiled, and I was like, God, is this going to be one of those movies that only has to offer this? Is this literally just a movie entirely premised on its twist, and there's going to be nothing interesting about it otherwise? And I couldn't have been more wrong, because this was super, oh man, the more I think about it, the more I like this movie. And I might have to eventually go back and change my rating, my Letterboxd rating that we're gonna throw up once we post this episode. But yeah, this movie, it asks so many really interesting questions, controversial questions, uncomfortable questions, and it really, like, questions that people really don't want to answer. And that's what I think's been so fascinating about the reaction to it, where some people are discussing it, but they're not discussing it in a way that I think is satisfying or more than surface level in any way, because I think they don't want their like talking points to be misconstrued as controversial, because there really aren't any like right answers, I guess, as it were.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just it's the substance and the conversation around this movie is really lacking, and I think it brings about really interesting questions about, you know, when does an act turn unforgivable? And that could vary for, many different ways for many different people. Do you think about it in a pedantic way? Do you think about it in a pragmatic way? And I'm trying as best as I can right now not to spoil it
Yes.
quite yet
Yes.
because, but yeah, I guess what to set it up here, what are your thoughts on it?
Effectively, what the premise of the drama is, it's it sounds like the kind of prompt you'd get for like a "Am I the asshole?" like Reddit post where it's like my fiance did something and I responded this way. Am I the asshole? You know,
Hmm.
and so it's very popular. You see those things kind of go viral all the time. They're or like our YouTube shows entirely just premised around reading them and reacting to them. But it's a little different when it's a movie and there's actors in it that you have some kind of like awareness of or attachment to, and you put Hollywood sweetheart Zendaya and you present her as the most irredeemable like being in cinema of the moment, second only to I guess maybe Paul Atreides, for the people who really know what's going on in Dune. It's a big question, like who is more evil here. The and honestly, this is, you could make the argument that this character represents her best villain turn of her career, even better than Challengers. Like it, or I forget what, I don't know. She really doesn't do a lot of villain things. I'm being kind of glib here, but like there's something about taking, like an aspirational figure like her and presenting her as this broken thing that people don't realize it, like her real character. The audience doesn't, her friend doesn't, played by Alana Haim. She deserves a supporting actress Oscar, just for how venomous and like outraged she is. Like she is the voice of all the people in the audience who react a certain way to the revelation. Like that's who she is there to represent. But what does that, I guess ultimately, I don't know. Like I struggle at getting into the meat here without spoiling it either. But at its core, yeah, like that's the question. It's like, how much are you willing to accept about someone that you love? Like, is there a breaking point? Should there be a breaking point? Whatever happened to being ride or die? You know what I mean? Like that whole concept. Like
Hmm.
nobody is ride or die at a certain level. Eventually, you have to break away. Like look at, I don't know, like that actor who was in Little Big League and The West Wing, who's married to the Little House on the Prairie actress. I can't think of his name, but he very recently got accused of sexual misconduct
Oh yeah.
on,
Hmm.
I forget his name, but he
Yeah.
plays the journalist in The West Wing. That's what I know him
Hmm.
from. And he does directing and stuff like that. And she is ride or die for him, but she's cracking, because like she is struggling deeply with what he is accused of, but she still has to keep up the brave face, because she knew he was an imperfect vessel, but did she know he was this imperfect? Like that's, I don't know. There's real world, examples of this drama, and I think we all can relate to it to an extent. And everyone's got that deep dark thing that they're like, I would never admit this unless I was 3 bottles deep at a risotto tasting, like at the venue for my wedding. Maybe I would, cough up my deep dark secret if I felt like other people's were just as bad. Like I don't know, like yeah, because like you could say anything and skate by without admitting your truth. Because like how, like are you really ready to be that vulnerable? And what is the consequences of vulnerability? Like there's a reason why secrets are secrets sometimes.
Yeah, well, why don't we? I mean, we've talked around it enough, I think. And so if you're watching this and somehow still haven't seen it, clock out now because so what's going on in this movie is basically that Zendaya had planned and almost committed a school shooting. And the funny thing about the reaction to this film is I noticed, I pay a lot of attention to, things like reviews, things like pod movie podcasts. I listen to a lot of movie
What's the
podcasts, and
chatter saying? You know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I noticed that when this movie, on Friday, this movie came out last, Friday, last Thursday, Friday, and there just was no conversation about it. And it was very strange because it was almost as if people were talking about this movie most definitely, but it was just very superficial conversations. And it's almost as if, people were waiting for, it's like other people wanted other people to jump first and
Hmm.
when talking about it because they didn't know what to say. And because what this movie is ultimately asking you is sort of, it's asking you to analyze your feelings about a person who could have the capacity to plan and then nearly commit a school shooting as far as could you still be that person's friend? Could you be their acquaintance? Could you be their lover, their boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever? Could you overlook it and move on? Or is the fact that they chose not to commit the act, is that proof enough of you that they're in relatively stable? Or would you need time to move on? It's asking you all these questions, and then it's also asking you to sort of appraise the moral weight of that act against other acts like infidelity or locking a mentally challenged person in a
Dude.
closet overnight
See,
and
like my jaw
stuff
was
like
on
that.
the floor, during that scene, just like from that initial story. Like
Mhm.
it just progressively got worse and worse. Obviously, but like her indignation, over the school shooting, confession is crazy if you think about the fact that she could have killed that kid.
Yeah. Oh
Like
yeah.
it's like, hold on a second here. You are just as bad, except you actually did the thing. You
Yeah, she
just,
did. Yeah, that's an interesting a note. I mean,
but
all
like
of
you
these
say, it's the
people.
morality. Yeah, it's like it wants you
Yeah,
to think about it.
because Pattinson it basically admits to because this all comes about from like a weird game of what's the worst thing you've ever done, and Pattinson fesses up to basically cyberbullying a kid so much that he had to him and his parents had to move, and
Which is
then
insane. Yeah,
yeah, and then his buddy, admits to like using his girlfriend as a human shield against an aggressive dog or something. And so
which I judge
all
him
of these
for.
things.
Yeah,
Oh, definitely,
yeah.
yeah. Because these other things, it's interesting. You did point out an interesting fact that these other things are things that actually happened. Like the act had been committed, and so that is also a very interesting wrinkle to all the questions. But yeah, I mean, I guess we ultimately have to ask ourselves, I guess before we get into the sort of the aesthetics of the movie and performances and stuff like that, we ultimately have to ask ourselves, what would you do in Pattinson's situation? And how would you answer that question?
That's it's. I would be understanding and empathetic.
Mhm.
Just in that, it's like as someone who has had like suicidal ideation, I kind of view them in the same prism. Like whether
Mhm.
you're thinking about harming somebody, whether it's yourself or another person, and to walk yourself back from that ledge, I would be forgiving. Like I would have empathy for it. And then like having empathy because it's and then appreciating the fact that they embrace their humanity, instead of what was pushing them away from it. Like I think it's a sign of character to you know not succumb to those impulsive thoughts or like those what's the term for it where like your brain tries to convince you to drive off of a highway overpass.
Oh,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
uh
Yeah, something, yeah, I know
Intrusive
what you're
thought,
saying.
an intrusive thought.
Yeah, intrusive thought.
Yeah,
Yep.
to take an intrusive thought and make it a dedicated like mission where you're like the Unabomber recording a manifesto on a webcam, with your
Mhm.
dad's rifle, like all I like the young lady who played the younger version of that character did such a good job, and
Mhm.
and I I just imagined the production of all those flashbacks was just kind of different than the making of the rest of the movie. Like it just seemed to have a little bit more of a snappier feel to it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, yeah.
I
How
think a
about
lot of
you? What would you? How
I
would you
think
answer that question?
it's tough because I really boiled it down to sort of being maybe a little bit. I'm sure some people would probably call me a little bit too overly pedantic or pragmatic, but I mean I see everything as far as like really heinous stuff like this goes, or even just crimes in general. I see it as like a four-step process where it's like you think about the act, you plan the act, you attempt the act, and then you complete the act. And in my eyes, Emma only got to step two.
Yeah,
And I think
she was
that,
she was about to step over three.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there's definitely cause for concern, of course, but she hadn't quite, in my eyes, gotten to like the point of no return, which probably would be like step three, like the attempt of the act. And so, and plus, there are mitigating factors also as far as like a lot of time has gone by. She devoted herself to, anti-gun violence causes.
Well,
And
not only that, like the weird like anti-bullying, anti-school shooter like ritual classes that they were like doing,
yeah,
where they were
yeah.
like walking in front of each other and like acknowledging each other's humanity.
Mhm,
Like I don't know. We came from a different generation, but it's like I
mhm.
never experienced a symposium like that once.
No, not at all.
And but I
No,
imagine they're more prevalent in this day and age, maybe.
yeah, those and drills too. I mean, I've heard about, friends with kids who, they do like the shooter drills in school now, and
Yeah,
it's very sobering. And so yeah, I mean, ultimately, I would probably go through with the wedding because of those things, because of these
same.
sort of mitigating factors. I mean, present day Emma does seem otherwise well adjusted too, where, she seems until her wedding day starts getting ruined, she seems relatively sane. But I mean, I guess that would cause probably any bride to go a little bit insane. But I know there are people that probably would have, other complications with my arguments as far as like, how devoted was she really to the anti-gun violence causes? Because
Yeah,
at the end of the day, it really just seemed like she was looking for friends. And of course, joining a school club is one way you're going to get friends. And so, and then also, people probably would argue that just the fact that she brought the gun to the school is crossing a line. And
yeah,
I mean, the only reason, uh, I think the only reason why she didn't go through with it was because somebody like beat her to the punch basically, where
exactly.
they were in their computer lab and it had been reported that another shooting had taken place. And so yeah, I mean there are sort of these complications to my argument, I guess, too, but that's kind of the beauty of the movie.
Yeah, because that's the thing. It's because of statute of limitations. Because she didn't get caught and didn't like fess up until enough time had passed. Like, there's nothing criminally that can happen to her, even though she came that close. If she
Hmm.
had been caught, oh yeah, they'd prosecute her as though she was getting ready to wipe out the whole school, and they'd have the video evidence to prove it. Like there'd be so much for them to be able to be like, hey, like this was more than premeditated. This was meticulously planned. And
Hmm.
they could prosecute her, to the full extent of the law because of that.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but
Well,
like that's kind of the whole, like you say, that's the whole point.
the point, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, is to ask these questions, to ask these uncomfortable questions, to start a conversation, and that's what good movies do, and so that's why I'm so hot on this. I'm so hot on this movie, and you had mentioned the flashbacks. I want to talk about that. What did you think of those? They're used at many times throughout the movie in both sort of, I guess, different ways too. Not they're not all the same. And so what
Yeah,
did you make of those?
because like initially, the front end of the movie, it's the both of them separately, reminiscing, about anecdotes from their meet cute to like how their relationship got started, like to their respective like like maids of honor, groomsmen, characters, and it almost feels like you're getting a speed run of a relationship, which I appreciated because that's really like how this couple got together. Really, like it isn't that important to me when I know what the meat of the movie's going to be, but in this one, it's very important. That initial scene where he's remembering, like his awkward, like, oh, I'm gonna take a picture of the book she's reading so that I can have something to talk about. Because like the whole beginning of the relationship begins with that misrepresentation, and then the confession. So it's like that dynamic is baked into how these two relate to each other anyway. It's
Mhm.
of like opening up the Russian nesting doll of your partner and going, oh, I didn't know that about you, but I guess I'll just keep opening you up and seeing what else is in here. Like
Mhm.
they don't scare each other away. They're willing to accept it because like the but it just had such a light and airy way of doing it that like it wasn't bogged down by what is essentially exposition at all, because like there's a reason for it in that he's building his whole speech that he's going to give to sell the vision of what their relationship is. That his buddy's like, are you sure you want to like talk about this shit? Like, are you
Yeah.
sure you want this shit out there? So like from the jump, that opening scene is so great, because it is just on Front Street saying like, this is what this is going to be. And from like that, and it's doing the same exercise, to different forms.
We were talking about the flashbacks and uh the I love when he's like trying to look up different ways where he can talk about like the sex they have. Like when he's like, he's looking up like different words on like, dictionary.com and then also, the flashbacks eventually do take like a sinister turn where, after he finds out about the shooting, the attempted shooting, um he thinks about like, the slapping during sex and it's like, oh, was that, a sign of something else and stuff like that. And I just really loved all that stuff. Just stellar editing. I mean, incredible. Like just the placement of all those flashbacks, the placement of the sort of interstitial scenes, just great editing.
Let's see here. Yeah, and yeah, beyond the, I guess the editing, we should probably call out our boy Daniel Pemberton. Like, what did you think
Yeah.
of the music?
Yeah, I don't know if I noticed it all that much. I
Exactly.
had yeah, I had put it in. Yeah, I know. I just noticed. I was like, okay, this is interesting because last podcast we had just watched Project Hail Mary, which he also did the music for, and it was incredibly in your face in that movie, where it was like these big, choral arrangements, like organ heavy music, and in this, I don't know if I noticed it at all.
No,
I guess I was too locked in, maybe.
exactly. The soundtrack of this movie to me, like the score of this movie to me, was the ringing in your ears during awful, awkward, tense moments. Like like that's what this movie did to me. That's the mind space it put me in, because I was just like constantly just digging my fingers into my armrest, just being like, "Oh Jesus, oh no, like this can't be happening, not like this." But
Mhm.
that was part of the pleasure of it, because
Well,
like
it's a testament to
yeah.
the cast, I think, because there's so many like bit parts in this movie where it wouldn't work as well if you didn't get like the best people for it. Like
Mm-hmm.
the replacement wedding DJ. That guy is
So glad you
hilarious.
mentioned that, dude. His
Yeah.
scene just kept on going and going and going, and that dude just ate it up. And I
Yeah.
loved that guy. Like their heroin smoking DJ was probably just fine. They did not need to get
Yeah.
this dweeb. who's just here to talk about how awesome his gear is.
Yeah, yeah, his setup and his, the types of music he's gonna play and like the vibe he wants to like make, and they just could care less at that point. And yeah, he was great. And I mean, just you've got the frustrated like dance instructor when they're like practicing for their first dance. You've got the wedding photographer, Carrie from Succession.
So
That was
lovely to
I
see her again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole scene is, you talk about awkward scenes, and that whole scene is just, that's the pinnacle. That's when they're just, standing there and they just don't even know what to do, like where to put their arms or where to, look, and the fake smiles, and I just love that whole scene. And I mean, even down to there are people in this movie that have literally like one line and it's memorable. Like the waiter at the wine tasting where she's just like, tell them we're not a bar. Like she's pissed about how long they're staying there, and that was
Well,
great.
and like in her line before that, where she's like, "And now, like, there's you can't change your mind again." Like, so
Yeah,
like
that's right.
you get the subtle hint that this couple is awful, and they are the worst wedding couple that you could ever hope to deal with.
Mhm.
And so, and that's why, like, as I was like, I was constantly reminded of those, like, "Am I the asshole?" or like, "This is my wedding disaster story," like Reddit story time post, because every single person in this movie could be the narrator of that story. It's like, oh my god, let me tell you about this wedding I catered where it was just a shit show. The groom wound up bloody on the floor at the end, and I don't know what the fuck happened with the bride, but oh my god.
Yeah, yeah, I love that way of thinking about it. Yeah, every character in this film could be the main character
Well,
of another movie.
yeah, like the baristas in the first scene when like he walks up and she just like can't hear him, and he just the camera just quick cuts to them all looking at this guy just blowing it.
Yeah.
Like there's such great subtleties and like no small parts, only small actors. Sort of a feeling to it.
hmm Yeah, that was great. I guess let's see. I'm trying to think here. Well, I guess, just to mention this, one thing I guess I was a little uh to say negative about the movie. I think the whole like reoccurring segment of them like pretending to not know each other was a little like trite. It sort of seemed like a overplayed bit from like a romantic comedy to me. I
Hmm.
don't know. Like it just I understand why it was there, and I understand, it played, they try, they attempt that multiple times throughout the movie, and it works in varying degrees throughout the movie, but it's just one of those things where I think this movie otherwise does a really good job of subverting tropes, but that to me felt very tropey, where it's like God, this is something out of like uh a a shittier romantic comedy, You, Me, and Tuscany, that movie that comes out next week or something like that. Um, but yeah, I don't know. What did you have any thoughts on that, or did it
you
not
know,
bother you?
See, like to me, that was part of the anti rom-comness of it. This I was I don't know, I was put in the same kind of vibe as Sanctuary, that movie from a few years back, which
Hmm.
was very similar in that it played with tropes, but like it had like an ending that felt triumphantly ambiguous, where you like didn't quite know where you had landed at the end, but you could have a variety of interpretations to it. And this one kind of like did the same thing for me, and and those tropes, I'm more tolerant of them, because I've had to watch so many rom-coms. So like I'm just kind of like, okay, yeah, you're gonna do something like that. But I guess the to me it worked because it's like they were constantly playing that cycle. Their meet cute needed to try it again because he didn't realize she was deaf. They've always been coming back and trying again, and like doing like a save scum of their relationship. So they may as well keep going down that path and just doing the thing that makes no sense in rom-coms, which is just being like, well, I know that everything's fucked up and like we just went through this awful experience, but I still love you, so let's get back together for no reason at all. Which is what like every rom-com ends, like after all of the melodrama and the zaniness, eventually it just circles back to, I don't care that you lied about, being engaged to my brother, who was in a coma. I don't care that you bamboozled all of us just because you wanted to boink him. I love you. I'm Bill Pullman. You're Sandra Bullock. You're like, how many times, can something ridiculous occur? And here is something relatable in this ridiculousness. Like, no one's actually lived through a rom-com, but I imagine everybody has at least one friend where you're like, yeah, I know that guy's thought about bringing a gun to school. Like, everybody's got that friend, for better or worse. But
Yeah.
hopefully for better, because maybe we'd have less school shooters if more people just made a point of having that person be a friend to them, or, try and hit on them in a coffee shop. Because I don't know. I kind of feel like Pattinson's character swooped in and saved us all from this woman going postal at her design consulting job, because we only see her at work like one time, and admittedly it's at a time of peak stress when everything is going fucking pear-shaped in her life. But I could just see a totally different movie where it's just about her going insane and bringing a gun to work and killing everybody. Like there's a part of me that totally believes, yeah, she's compassionate, and yeah, she doesn't want to inflict pain on people and cause discomfort, but she does have a rage that can't be quenched. And you just and I guess he made a choice. He's like, I will marry her so that I'll never be on the other side of it.
Yeah,
Maybe.
and that's kind of where I mean that's kind of where we end because the ending of this movie is basically, I mean, they've embarrassed themselves in front of their family, their friends. They've
Professionally, they're
Yeah,
all fucked
professionally,
up.
they're probably gonna both have to quit their jobs. You have Charlie's sort of infidelity or near infidelity, depending on how you want to define that. And
Because that's a thorny.
the
There's degrees to that.
yeah, there's also degrees to that. And so, it's like at the end of the day, the only good thing that really came about their wedding day was the fact that they actually got married because we don't see the actual ceremony. We never see the ceremony. We just know that they are now, in fact, married. And
We're here for the
so,
drama, Matt. We are just.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we don't want to see that. And so, I don't know. Where do you think they go from here? Because the ending, I think the ending is fairly hopeful as far as they meet up again at the diner, and it seems like they're going to reconcile in some way. But do you think they're just destined to like repeat this pattern over and over, or what?
Quite, quite possibly. But, the I think now there's no more secrets. So there's nothing more that
Mm,
they have to keep from each other. So they can move forward in lockstep instead of being, off beat of each other, which would have
mhm.
ultimately doomed their relationship. The fact that they have no secrets now is what propels them forward. I think they make it. It's the exact opposite of The Graduate, where
Yeah,
your
yeah.
ending is making you go, "Oh, what the fuck have we done? Where the fuck do we go from here?" I think they know exactly where they're going from here, and it's right into their 80s, walking through Central Park. I don't know, like something they're getting the rom com ending we never see, which is them old and gray, getting laid into the earth together, because they're
Sure.
made for each other, man. Because this is a movie.
And that's going to be that ending. That's going to be one thing that we're going to come back to when we talk about after we talk about our second film here. So, do you want to
Mhm.
transfer into
Yeah,
a history of violence now?
definitely, because
Yeah.
we have to remember, I guess, the provenance of this. I think that's important to it. We have Cronenberg, who he had made Existence to in 1999 to kind of cap off the 90s, and then he made a movie called Spider with Rafe Fiennes that really was kind of hard to watch, and a lot of people didn't really like. And so, like, where does he go from here? Well, there's a script popping around, the industry, and he gets tied to it. And it's an adaptation of '90s independent graphic novel that I have read and is very much a hard boiled kind of, like drab '90s black and white, graphic novel. It's very much more interested in the background of this guy who, has ran away from the mob life and has it creep back into his life. It's very much concerned with who he was as a young man and all this nonsense. What this movie does so well with the source material is cutting all that shit out, because it makes you wonder exactly who you're dealing with right up until like its conclusion. Whether or not like are these mobsters right about Tom Stahl being this elusive Joey character? Like, are they right about that? And the evidence is before you, the audience, as you watch it, because you just see what this man is capable of and what he's willing to do, and how he's able to overcome the hardest and nastiest human beings on the planet. There are some mean motherfuckers in this movie, and they make you root for this guy right up until the moment that you don't, which is, like, why like its ending is just so powerful to me, because, much like, the movie we just spent a half an hour talking about, when it gets you to the end and you are left having to reconcile all the things that you've been rooting for, it's like what kind of a home is this guy having for his family when it's, built on a foundation of blood and dead bodies? Like, how can he keep coming back to this idyllic small town life day in and day out? How can his family, how can this town, like it just leaves you thinking so much when it's all said and done, that like this and Eastern Promises to me are my favorite Cronenberg movies, because they
Yes.
represent this defining era in his filmography when it stopped being about, how he could make you feel, gross and uncomfortable with gross and uncomfortable imagery, and he replaces that, yeah, with, with violence, but also with making you think about being the person who does it. So that's my soapbox for it.
Yeah.
What was your experience with this? Did you see this in theaters? Did you see it on VHS? Because this was the last major Hollywood release on VCR VHS tape.
I think, this is one of the ones. I think I was a tad too young to see it in theaters in 2005. I remember watching it at home or at a friend's house or something like that. I know I first saw it on a TV screen originally, and I remember really liking it then. But I want to say, I try and think back to then, and I want to say the only reason I really liked it then was because I was a dumb teenager and I was like, yeah, this movie's fucking cool. Like,
Blood,
look at all
violence.
the,
Yeah.
yeah, like, look at all the cool fights and like look at when he, caved in that guy's, throat. And like, that was like the reason why I liked it then. And it's funny to revisit it now because the thing that I keep going back to, the thing I love about it now is especially like the first, I don't know, I guess like half hour, 45 minutes where everything is so like Norman Rockwell, small town America, like Midwestern Americana. And the movie is about how like they're basically upsetting the apple cart of this small town where you have this breakfast scene and you have, this idyllic diner where he goes in, he walks into his diner and there's like literally already somebody like at the, they're eating and his cook's there and you have his sons playing baseball in gym class and then he goes home at night and he bangs his wife in her old cheerleader outfit and it's just it's very like small town Americana. I loved it. I was here for it. And then, shit pops off.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this idea of like these interlopers, they come in and they upset this idyllic small town. And you have to imagine that most of the people in this town know each other. there's very little crime or very little notable crime, and in general everybody's just very genial with each other, and these two guys come in and they immediately break the social contract, and it just had me thinking a lot about, like, you know, instances of that in my real life where I've been in like situations like that where somebody comes into a public space and with the express intention of like upsetting the public order. And there's this tension in the air where, everybody that's there, that there's this unspoken desire to de-escalate the situation, for it to just all go away. Like everybody just wants this person to go away, and he captured that feeling really well. And so I just loved it for that this time around.
The the scene when like his son and his like not girlfriend are smoking weed like on that stoop, and he
Yeah.
just like drops that depressing brain thought on her, and she's like, Jesus Christ, dude, like what the fuck, and there's cars just driving by and people being assholes. It's like that is every small town in this country. That is all there
It,
is to do, is just burn rubber and drag main. That's all that you got, available to you. So I related to that. And
mhm.
and that whole diner setup, like all the different characters. Yeah, and we got to shout out our boy McHattie for showing up again and just stealing the show, because that the opening sequence of this movie like always like hit me in the gut, like when I was younger, when I first saw this, because like I this movie kind of like is the demarcation point for me when I was elevating my cinema, you know and like so it was a history of violence, and then that like led very nicely into years where we had movies like No Country for Old Men and There Will Be Blood coming out, like they and then like Eastern Promises at the other end of that. I think about these movies a lot in the same way, because they're all they're all kind of like heavy masculine violent movies, but they're about a lot of the same subject matter, which is the death of idyllic America, and like, and what are we really? And this movie especially, you makes you confront that in the small town. What's been living in your small town the whole time? What didn't you know about your neighbor? What didn't you know about your husband? Would you be willing to live with the idea that this person that you've created a life with is someone else entirely, someone who has endangered you from the moment that they smiled at you for the first time? Yeah, like that's a level of betrayal that is hard to fathom.
To get us back into it here, you talk about uh, not knowing who your husband is, not knowing who your wife is, the secrets and stuff like that. And another thing that I clocked this time around that I really hadn't appreciated the other times I had seen this movie is that scene when the sheriff comes to the house, and it's sort of like it's basically Maria Bello trying to decide whether or not she's going to side with Tom or not. Where, he thinks, I mean, you can see it in his eyes, you can see it in Tom's eyes. He thinks he's about to have to just give everything up. Like either she's gonna out him or she's gonna force him to out himself. But then she sort of decides to, stand by her man, basically.
Yeah,
And I really, really appreciated that scene.
because it it directly precedes the I guess the most controversial part of this movie, which is the marital rape scene. That's not something. Is that what it was to you? Like is like
I don't
did
think so.
yeah.
I know that Cronenberg has talked about how he is sort of upset that that's how people took it.
Hmm.
And when you do, it was I mean, it was very shocking. I remember back when the movie first came out, people were very, very much, shocked by it. And when I watch it now, you do notice that, she does. I think he made a very, very explicit choice to have her, kiss him back.
Yeah.
I think at one point he even tries to like turn away, and she like grabs his face and forces him to like make out with her. And so it's like, okay, clearly these are, this is both of them want this, clearly.
Yeah, it's like, and we don't have to even get into the, like, any weird territory here, because yeah, but yet again, it's like it's part of what makes this thing so rich,
Mhm.
is the fact that it has, you know, aspects to it that, beyond make you feel uncomfortable, really make you confront something.
Mhm.
And yet again, it's no one wants to empathize with what may be objectively evil, in that way. But at the same time, it's like you're rooting for this guy, you're rooting for his family, you don't want anything bad to befall them. And at the same time, it's like you want this couple to work, man. They're still doing the cheerleader role play, like at their age. Like, come on, like, God bless them. Like, that's the American dream.
Yeah.
We want this to work. But yeah, it's like, do you think it works? Does their marriage survive? How much longer is this guy able to stay in this town before, the next head of the snake that's grown back comes looking for him? Or even the long
Mhm.
arm of the law finally keys in and goes, "Oh, wait a minute. It's Joey. It's Joey Bag
Yeah.
of Donuts. He's been here the whole time,
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely that's interesting, question as far as where do they go from here? Because the feeling that you get from the small town sheriff is that basically it's his desire also to not basically upset the apple cart, and so he was totally ready to just give up the line of questioning. So I don't think the sheriff himself is going to give them any more trouble, but it's as you said, it's like what happens when the people above Richie come looking for them. The guys who Richie was talking about wouldn't promote him because of Tom's actions back
exactly.
when he was. And so like yeah, it's interesting because Cronenberg doesn't give you much in that last scene as far as Maria Bello's acting goes, because you get the sense that his children are ready to forgive him by their actions, as far as his daughter brings out the place setting for him, and then his son hands him the food, but then you see Maria Bella looks up from her food and she's not giving you much. She's pretty stone faced. She has a tear coming down, her cheek, but that's about it. And so it's tough to tell what's going to come about now.
I think we have to shout out all the actors in this. Maybe not
Mhm.
Ashton Holmes, but
Yeah, he was pretty
he's pretty bad.
bad.
But yeah,
Yeah.
this is the movie that made everyone look at Viggo Mortensen a little differently. He wasn't just Aragorn.
Mhm.
It's what kind of made me realize, oh, like, this guy, like, what else has this guy done? It's what made me seek out the reflective skin, or the reflecting skin, rather. That's what it's called,
Mhm.
which is like early Viggo Mortensen. Like, I guess after Witness, but definitely before this, and Lord of the Rings. Ed Harris. Oh my god, just
Yeah.
I fucking conic. Like his dead eye, the way that he would just go Joey. Like, it's just burned into my brain all these years later. As soon as he shows up, it's like a warm blanket to me. I'm just like, oh, my favorite baddie is here. But why did William Hurt have to go so fucking hard? Like, why did his 8 minutes on screen have to be like some of the best in cinema history? Why did he have to go so hard?
Yeah, because he famously, of course, William Hurt was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for this movie, and he ranks among the people who have been nominated with the shortest amount of screen time. And I mean, I would, I guess, point. You mentioned how good Harris was. I think Harris probably should have been nominated too. But as far as Hurt goes, um, yeah, he's so great. I mean, he's menacing, and I think my favorite thing about his performance is just how unbelievable he finds the situation in which Tom is able to like finagle himself out of getting killed, where he's just like the second that Tom, sort of gets the drop on all like three or four of his stooges, William Hurt is just, sitting there and he's like, why is this happening? Why are you allowing this to happen? And then he eventually does, go for his gun in the desk, but and even when they go outside and the door is locked or is closed behind him, he's just so like he's like, how this is unbelievable. Like, how is this happening,
No, he's just indignant. He's like, I've just been grandstanding like a villain for like 5 minutes, and now this is what's fucking happening.
Yeah. Yeah, so great.
So
And
great. And
he
his
totally
his
he totally
beard,
deserved it.
yeah, like his facial hair was iconic. Because like,
Yeah.
who won that year? Because that would have been like 2006
Yeah, yeah, that
Oscars.
would have been the Oscars that came out in 2006. So I'm not entirely sure.
78. I need this for my own edification. I need to find
Little
that.
Miss Sunshine, did anyone from Little Miss Sunshine get
It
nominated?
was
Or
George
no?
Clooney, Syriana.
Oh, Siriano, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
God, what a dog shit year for movies.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
was the crash year. That is offensive. That is offensive. That like the oh Munich.
Yeah, those are two movies that nobody remembers. I mean, Syriana and Crash,
Good
yeah.
Night and Good Luck. Like
Yeah.
Capote. It's not even the best Truman Capote movie,
Mhm.
arguably. And of course, Brokeback Mountain. Dead ass. Someone at my job the other day randomly, like I just walked in the door and she was like, "Yo, you ever seen Brokeback Mountain?" And I was like, "Yeah, a long time ago." And she was like, "What would you do?" It's so who are you rooting for? Were you rooting for the guys or are you rooting for their wives? And I was like, "I don't know. I haven't thought about it in that way." And she was like, "I don't know, man. I understand what like those women. They, they knew what was going on. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
She just went on this whole rant, and I was like, wow, I haven't thought about Brokeback Mountain since.
It was funny how she took that. That's how she took that
Yeah,
movie. But
but secrets.
I guess
It's on brand. It's in theme.
yeah. Oh yeah. I guess while we're doing sidebars here, I wanted to know this specifically. So we talked a lot about Viggo Mortensen and how this movie was kind of his career turn after Lord of the Rings. He was sick of, the blockbuster, thing. And he pretty much, I mean, I don't think Mortensen's ever done a blockbuster since, but I'm curious how you feel about his career, his post Lord of the Rings career, especially now that we have about 20 more years of that of his post Lord of the Rings career, and he's freaking 67 years old now,
That's
which is crazy
crazy.
to me.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, what do you make of his career and his sort of limitless dedication to working with Cronenberg, or always being at Cronenberg's beck and call?
and it all kind of circles back to this movie too, because like has Cronenberg made a movie without him since? Maybe The
Uh,
Shrouds. That might be
the
the
Shrouds,
yeah,
yep.
that might be the
Mhm.
first time. And I have to imagine it was entirely because Vigo just wasn't available. Otherwise, I'm sure
Yeah.
he would have been Vincent Castle's character.
I guess Cosmopolis.
Oh yeah, I forgot about
Yeah.
that.
Uh,
Robert Pattinson.
mhm.
Oh
Yeah.
man, there's a cosmology here. There's some
Mhm.
kind of like Grant Morrison, chaos magic at work that we just aren't quite seeing. But your note about the Cadillac Escalade
Oh
remind
yeah.
me of that because that went over my head.
Yeah, so that was like, that was just one of the things. There are certain things when you watch any movie that's more than 20 years old now, there are sort of these dated things that you notice. And one of them was, so when he goes to the bar in Philly to meet up with Richie's like stooge, and he's like, he puts the beer down, and he's like, okay, what's gonna happen now? And the stooge is basically like, what's gonna happen now is you're gonna finish your beer, and I'm gonna take you to see Richie in the Escalade. And I just found that line hilarious because if you remember back to like 2005, Cadillac Escalades were like peak luxury SUVs. Like they were having a moment. They were in all the Everybody wanted one. They were in all of like the rap music videos. They were, just they were huge, and they had just come out. It was a relatively new car,
I see.
new model of car, and I just found that hilarious because that was like the line they could come up with to sort of signify that either this guy thinks he's a high roller or this is what we think a high roller would say in this
Yeah,
situation back in 2005.
it would impress somebody from Indiana, but in the big
Yeah.
city, it's like whatever.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to call out, just because I had to listen to it, as I was making the bumper graphics for this, the trailer for this movie, you can kind of see it in the editing, but if you could hear
Mm.
the audio, like all the weird like whooshes and like the sound effects that are layered into it, the narration, movie trailers are just not constructed like this anymore. Like it's so funny that a movie like this, that's so like forward facing otherwise, would be represented in such a pedestrian way. Like nowadays this thing would be edited very differently to sell it to people. And I just found that interesting because like this was edited like you would sell like a paperback novel in an airport. You know what I mean? Like in
Yeah, how it's
comparison,
like
yeah.
it's turning, yeah, it like freeze frames and turns to black and white, and there's like the weird like flash bulb like effect and the slow motion. Yeah, I love all that. It's very, yeah, quintessential like 2000s trailer. All you're missing is like the In a World
And
guy,
they
his
haven't
voice.
and it's not exactly him, but it's one of those guys that was
Yeah.
recognizable. Like there was like four or five people who worked in the
Mhm.
the trailer narration business in the 90s and the aughts, and he was employed on this one, and I found that interesting. Now both of these movies kind of come together, pretty neatly, and I,
Yeah.
I think that's so interesting just because they're so like different in terms of like what they're actually like to watch, but they make you explore the same ground, in different ways. And what did you make of like the dichotomy between the two?
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately, when you're trying to sort of think about how these movies relate to each other, both of them are ultimately about regretting things from your past and attempting to move on in as best as you can, in the best ways you can think about. And that's ultimately what both, Zendaya and Viggo Mortensen are trying to do. But there is also a dichotomy to them in that you have Tom, who is consistently denying that he is Joey until he cannot deny it any longer, basically. And then you have Emma from the drama, who literally just offers up her secret willingly, and she just makes a mistake basically
Yeah.
about doing that, and she could have just lied or she could have just said something else and the whole movie would have been different, though none of the events even happened. And so that was interesting. And then of course, yeah, you pointed out, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but the endings, I mean, these are very, these two movies that really have nothing to do with each other. The endings are very similar, where you have, characters staring at each other over a meal, yeah, who have just had their lives upended, and then it basically cuts to black, and there's this hint that there will be some form of reconciliation after the credits of the movie, but you don't really know. You're not really there's some ambiguity there. And so it just is they're very similar endings.
And I think that maybe just kind of speaks to the subject matter, like
Hmm.
great minds think alike, ultimately. And I love the screenplays for both of these. Like I want to read them, for
Hmm.
myself now after revisiting the history of violence, and I just want to know what else Borgley's got cooking, because this was a fiendishly delightful comedy of menace that I had a lot of fun with, and at the same time, I haven't had a movie made me think this much in a long time either. Like to this extent where it's like it's all I could think about for a while. Like it was just processing it and talking to Angie about it and that kind of thing. And
Yeah, same. Yeah,
yeah,
it's just it makes you think, and it deserves more conversations than what are being had about it.
yeah, don't be chicken shits, people.
Mhm.
Like it, and I know that it's tough, because it's like if you're putting like if you're genuinely putting yourself in danger by expressing an opinion, that's a problem first and foremost. But then
Yeah.
I mean danger facetiously. It's like you no one wants to risk losing anything. I understand that,
Mhm.
but we're talking about a movie here, and and maybe don't admit your deep dark secret. As you as you talk about this movie, but you can talk about what the movie made you feel and think about. And you can express opinions on what the characters did and didn't do. Without I don't think anyone should lose anything because they said something about a movie literally called the drama. And I think maybe that's like its ultimate like thumb in the eye that it's doing. It's like all this stupid shit that everyone expresses opinions on every day, and we have to be delicate about how we look at this movie. I think that kind of ultimately drives the point home. Much like how like the conversation about A History of Violence stopped being about like what the movie was about and about a discrete scene within it. We kind of alluded to that when we were talking about it. But
Yeah, very good point.
yeah, there's a lot to think about from both of these, and I'm interested in hearing some other recommendations. What other movies fit within this milieu that what else fits the
Yeah.
bill? And I guess you do that with every single episode we put out. I want to know what else can we fit within the wheelhouse.
Hmm.
But I guess, yeah, that kind of does it for us this week. Next time we gather, we're going to be doing kind of a wilderness survival special, as it were. We're going to review Apex, and was it Backcountry that we settled on?
Killing Ground.
Killing Ground. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Killing Ground. Because they're Australian set wilderness survival stories. And one has Charlize Theron in it, so at least Netflix has someone they can sell it with, and that's where you all can find it. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you all next time.
See ya.